So a while back, I had a study done by a professor that was about the values shared by European nations, the sort of national values, and how they were different and compared to one another. And I can't find the fucking thing. If anyone can remember what it was, I'm sure I talked about it on a stream or something. If anyone can remember what it was, please let me know so I can find it again, because it was really useful, and I think it's really important in explaining why the Brexit negotiations are going so badly, because that's the video I'm currently doing for my main channel at the moment, and it's taking me forever. I mean, have a look at these sources. I've just got so fucking many of them. So I'm just like, you can see just like all of these. It just keeps going. There's a bunch of stuff I haven't categorized and stuff like this yet. But anyway, it's taking a long time to make. This is why my videos take so long. It's not that I don't do work. It's just that I do a lot of work. So anyway, I ended up finding this, and this is the American Western European Values Gap, and this was very interesting. And I think it's from 2012, but I still think it's worth talking about. So, going straight to the surveys, the views of individualism and the role of the state. Which is more important? Now, to almost 60% of Americans, freedom to pursue life's goals without state interference is the purpose of the state. Like they have like the Lockean conception of the state. The state is there to protect your rights and do nothing else. And this is, I mean, look, you could take that sort of an extreme and like the objectivists and say, well, the only legitimate use of the state is the monopoly of force. So only things that require force are things that are justified the state doing. And with 35% think that the state guarantees nobody's in need. That's quite low, it's interesting. In Britain, it's the other way around, and same with Germany, in fact. 38% believe the freedom to pursue life's goals without state interference, so 38% are kind of Lockean liberals. 55% are kind of soft socialists, which is very interesting. And I get the feeling that these people think it sounds good in principle, or it sounds not even necessarily in principle, but just it sounds good in the abstract. Well, it would be nice if the state made sure that nobody was in need, but I don't. I think when the rubber hits the road, they're probably not going to want the state to completely dominate their lives. But I don't know. Maybe they will. Maybe they'll be full-on Corbyn worshippers. Who knows? But Germany is 36% are more sort of Lockean liberal, and 62% are kind of soft socialist. I'm gonna call them soft socialists rather than I don't want to call them democratic socialists, because then they're still in favour of the state eventually owning the means of production. You call them social democrats, actually. That'd be a nicer term. So yeah, more social democrats in Germany than Britain, but not too many more. So that's not something by which I think there would be a massive cultural rift between England and Germany, but there is. And it's only because I lived out in Germany for 8 years that I have this kind of obsession with figuring out what it is. But it's important, and I think it's the kind of root cause of all of the conflict between England and Germany. Because really, there's no particular reason why we shouldn't be the best of friends and have had a long history of cooperation, especially given Britain's enmity with France. You would think that the Germans would be completely on our side on almost everything because of their enmity with the French, but instead they seem to get along with the French quite well. And if you look here, the French are almost exactly the same in their opinion on what the state should do. So this is what I mean when I say a continental mindset. And look at the Spanish; they're even worse. I personally find myself leaning far more towards what the US thinks. I don't want the state getting in my shit. Like I said, I have no problem with universal healthcare because it's universal. It's not violating any of my principles. And honestly, it just makes life easier. I know that's a pragmatic argument. It's not an argument from principle, but it really does just make life easier. But it's this next one that is the most important. And this is... Honestly, I find this fucking fascinating. So, success in life is determined by forces outside our control. In the US, 36% agree. And I imagine that a lot of those people would also probably have said that the state guarantees nobody's in need. I imagine there's a great deal of crossover there. And 62% disagree. 62% of people in America believe that you can do these things for yourself. So that's not just Republicans. There are also Democrats who think this, obviously. In Britain, it's very similar, 41% to 55%. which is more disempowered than I would like, because ultimately what that's talking about, that's the idea of personal empowerment right there. If your life, and your success in your life, is determined by factors outside of your control, then you personally are being disempowered by that attitude. You're going to sit there and naturally think, well, I probably can't do this thing because there are systems of oppression keeping me in my place. So I need to work within these systems. It's going to be a natural corollary of just the state of mind. And in France and Spain, it's not too far off. But then you get to Germany, where 72% of people believe that your success in life is determined by outside forces, with only 27% disagreeing. That is fucking staggering to me. 72% of Germans believe that they didn't earn their own success. It's like, wow. That I hate to cite him. No, I don't hate to cite him, but like, ignore the drama. Like, Kraut always says, the Germans are institutionalists, and this would really explain why, wouldn't it? Of course they're going to be institutionalists. Of course they're going to be. If almost 3/4 of them think that their success in life is tied to forces outside of their control, therefore the institutions of their society, well, of course they're going to be thinking, well, I need to get into these institutions, I need to operate within them, and I need them to work for me. This is how I'm going to be successful. That's not what British and American people generally think. Unfortunately, in Britain, more than I'd like. To be honest, in America, more than I'd like as well. But that is 72% think that. That is, and this is why people are, oh, you can't just say all the Germans, not all Germans. Yeah, I know it's not all Germans, but it is a really large number of Germans, and it does absolutely affect the kind of attitudes that Germans have. And I only know this from speaking to Germans. I'm determined to get to the bottom of this. But anyway, that's like, it's just something I find incredibly fascinating, and I think that this is why the British and the Germans and the Continentals have approached the Brexit negotiations completely differently. The British are very much more free-flowing when it comes to these things. I mean, they didn't even turn up with any fucking notes. The Germans had stacks of notes, and they want everything crystal clear, all laid out before anything goes ahead. Whereas the British are like, look, let's just go through it, and we'll eventually come out of the other side with something that we can use. It's an anathema to the German mindset. They can't stand that. They believe that success in life is determined by forces outside of their control. And so, holy shit, we have to make sure that we have the systems and the institutions locked down. We need a process, which is why I haven't got a link up, unfortunately, but if you look at the process of Brexit, the EU have just a huge amount of, bureaucracy to go through. And I think this is one of the reasons it explains it. I mean, like, the other social differences really aren't very different, apart from military force to maintain order in the world, maybe, but I imagine that's Germany's fear of using military force. And they're very much in favour of getting UN approval. But then, to be fair, we are pretty in favour of that too. Isolationism versus engagement, there's not much difference. There's not much in it. This was interesting, though. Our people are not perfect, but our culture is superior to others. Half of people in the US are on either side of that. Half of people in Germany are on either side of that. In Britain, 63% don't think that British culture is superior to others, and 73% in France. That's disappointing, isn't it? That's really shocking. I mean, like, do you know what was really weird? In fact, I have it right here. Let me. So I've been obviously reading Mein Kampf, and it's really fascinating to see Hitler's opinion on the English. Here we go. Right. So he says that in Germany, through the medium of the schools, the press and the comic papers, the idea of an Englishman was gradually formed, which was bound eventually to lead to the worst kind of self-deception. The absurdity slowly but persistently spread into every quarter of German life. The result was an undervaluation for which we have had to pay a heavy penalty. The delusion was so profound that the Englishman was looked upon as a shrewd businessman, but personally a coward to an incredible degree. Unfortunately, our lofty teachers of history, professorial history, did not bring home to the minds of the pupils the truth that it is not possible to build up a mighty organisation as the British Empire by mere swindle and fraud. A few who called attention to the truth were either ignored or silenced. After a few, he's referring to World War One, and I can vividly recall to mind the astonished looks of my comrades when they found themselves personally face to face for the first time with the Tommies in Flanders. After a few days of fighting, the consciousness slowly dawned on our soldiers that those Scotsmen were not like the ones we had seen described and caricatured in the comic papers and mentioned in the communiques. It was then I first formed my ideas of the efficiency, sorry, get this right, of various forms of propaganda. Such falsification, however, served the purpose of those who had fabricated it. This caricature of an Englishman, though false, could be used to prove the possibility of conquering the world peacefully by commercial means. Angela. Where the Englishman succeeded, we should also succeed. Our far greater honesty, our freedom from that specifically English perfidy, would be assets on our side. Thereby, it was hoped that the sympathy of the smaller nations and the confidence of the greater nations would be gained more easily. We did not realise that our honesty was an object of profound aversion for other people because we ourselves believed in it. Blah blah blah. But basically, it's really interesting how he's like, look, the English are not, as we delude ourselves into being, moral cowards and personal cowards. But this was a convenient stereotype in Germany, and this was something that Dan Carlin hit on in his World War One podcast when he was talking about how when the Germans and the British first met, the British had like the only professional army in Europe, and they had brought back their colonial army to fight the Germans. It was only about 100,000 men strong, and it waxed them. The Germans were just getting gunned down in fucking droves, to the point where the English were starting to feel disgusted with their own efficiency, and these Germans apparently were like sort of Wagnerian, like fantasies in their head where they'd march forward locked arm in arm and then just get gunned down. The flower of Germany is being eradicated because of their delusional idea that an Englishman was unable to fight. And it was just like, that's not true. And I wonder how much of this kind of German superiority complex is playing into this. Because, I mean, like, we're not really superior. We don't have much of a superiority complex in British culture. In fact, we kind of hate our own culture. And it's kind of sad. Because, and the thing is, it's not bad to be realistic about the capacity of your opponents and the people around you. But I don't think you should hate yourself, you know? But, anyway, carry on. Sorry for that little diversion. It's just something that's been going on in my mind for a while. Interestingly, there wasn't a huge amount of difference between men and women when it came to the actual breakdown of it. It was remarkably even, which I'm surprised at. You would have thought, like, you know, with Black Pigeon speaks women destroy nations. Well, do they? I'm just saying. It seems to be young people that destroy nations, actually, if you look at the age breakdown. You know, like, our people are not perfect, but our culture is superior. Hardly any young Americans think that, whereas most older Americans think that. In Britain, it's actually slightly higher, but, you know, isn't that interesting? And down to 20% in France. I mean, don't get me wrong, they're right about themselves in France, but elsewhere in the Anglosphere, I'm just teasing. So, yeah, and obviously, more people with college degrees think that their culture is not superior, which doesn't surprise me at all. And this is an interesting one. Which is more important? In the US, that nobody's in need is 35%, which is congruent with what we'd seen previously, and freedom to pursue life's goals, which is why these people obviously think that the government, their only purpose is to protect your rights. And it's, you know, it obviously is the value that people are pursuing when they construct their view of what the government should be for, which, again, completely interesting. Yeah, I just can't get over this 72%. That just drives me nuts. But this is really interesting. The Americans are highly religious. And Europeans are just not. Maybe, could be that lack of religiosity that makes them want the government to do things. I guess there are a lot of Americans who put their faith in God. And the same with the morality and belief in God, which, I mean, don't get me wrong, it's lower than in Muslim countries, but it's not that far off. This is interesting, isn't it? In the US, almost half of Americans believe that they're Americans first, but almost half of Americans believe they're Christians first. Isn't that really interesting? In Britain, obviously, it's much less, and it was only asked of Christians. So, and I can imagine that this is having the effect that makes the US want to reject homosexuality much more than Europe, which is pretty much in step. So I just wanted to talk about this because I think it's really interesting, and it's something that I'm going to go on about a bit more in the live event I'm going to do, because I'm going to be quoting Mein Kampf in my live event, isn't that? That's going to get me some great PR, isn't it? But I'll also be quoting Ayn Rand, so I mean, you know. Who knows? But I just thought this was interesting, and I thought I'd share it with you because, you know, I don't think this video is going to be done until next week because of this live show. Otherwise, I would have been able to get it done a bit sooner. But sorry, I'll only have one video out on my main channel this week, which is This Week in Stupid. I don't think I'll have it done any quicker. But you can at least see that I'm not being idle.